Hey guys, this is Tyler Baumgartner. I'm here today to kind of go through a repair I recently did on my, it's a U320 Foretravel. It's a 40-foot motor coach. So basically, the issue here was that my steering box started leaking from the sector shaft. It's a Shepherd M100 steering box, so it's a relatively common steering box, and basically my plan through this whole thing was to actually take it out and send it to a rebuilder. The coach is like 20 years old, so at this point, I mean, it kind of probably needed more than just this sector shaft seal replacement. Plus, I was working in an outdoor environment where I didn't really have like a great way to do all these repairs, so I went through Redhead steering gears. They were very good, responsive, and honestly, it was a really good experience overall going through them for the rebuild. In the end, I would do that over again. So today I'm just going to go through a few of the tools that I used. Some of this stuff is kind of specialty, but for the most part, I think your average person who has worked on cars for some years or really, anything can do this repair. It is a little bit tricky because it's in a very compact space, but it is accomplishable. You just have to kind of go through what I'm saying and see if it will work for your rig or not. Okay, so here's some of the tools that I was using. I'll just kind of go through some of the specialty things that you will need to probably get this done. So an impact gun. I don't have access to an air compressor, and I like electric tools anyway, so I have this Milwaukee 1/2-inch impact. I think this thing is freaking awesome for, if you're kind of out in the, like I am. I'm in my backyard doing this, so it's not really the easiest place to have air. If you have shop air, just kind of ignore this, and a 1/2-inch, air impact would be totally fine overall. Next thing, I'd get some PB Blaster. If that thing's been on there for a while, it's not going to want to come off initially, and I used a decent amount of this, as well as I had a MAP gas torch. I keep mine somewhere down here, but anyways, a MAP gas torch would also be something you probably want to get, or a propane torch, either way, just something to put some heat on the pitman arm. The next kind of specialty thing that I would really recommend, it's an expensive tool, guys, like no doubt, but if you're going to do this job yourself, I would recommend getting one. It's a Shepherd M100 pitman arm puller from Tiger Tool, and I think if you can see the die marking on there, it's like 18325. Anyways, I called them and made sure that this was the right tool for the job. This thing was, I think, $240, but since I was stranded in my yard, like my thing was leaking so bad that I couldn't really go anywhere. So I kind of had to do this, and honestly, for the time, it saved me like hours worth of time getting this thing off. And it's very compact. You'll notice that there's not much hanging out. Even when this bolt is out, it fits in the space, and I'll show you this in a second so you can see it. You'll need the socket to drive it, which I think this one's a 32. It might be in standard. I'm not sure exactly, but I just used a 32 socket to drive it. Impact sockets, you'll need a 15/16 to get off the two big bolts that go onto the Shepherd that hold it on. The smaller ones, I think, were actually metric on there, 18, or I think 3/4 is the standard equivalent as well. You're going to need this is a 5/8 Allen drive, so 1/2-inch drive, and that's to actually remove the bolt that holds on the pitman arm shaft. There's like a big, or a retaining nut really, that goes over that shaft, and you'll need that. I'd also get some sort of 1/2-inch universal drive, just because the angle is a little bit weird sometimes, and you might need that. Also some 1/2-inch extensions, like this is a 5 and I think a 12-inch or a 10-inch. 7/8 to get off the power steering lines. That was pretty easy. Torque wrench, a 1/2-inch torque wrench, and then I had two 1/2-inch breaker bars. This is I think like a 26-inch breaker bar or something like that. It's a pretty big 1/2-inch breaker bar, but I definitely needed that to get off the larger retaining bolts, because I couldn't get my impact in there to actually do that. And then the smaller breaker bar I used a bit too, and then the 1/2-inch drive wrench just to, you know, get the bolts out once they're loose. They're pretty easy to access from there. Alright, I'll hop into the actual area next and kind of show you what went on there. Okay guys, so the next step here, you know, you're going to need to remove the 2 bolts to pull out the generator. That'll actually allow you access to the area where the pitman arm is located. I don't know if you can see that in there. You can see that silver shaft in there, and that's actually the pitman arm where you'll be putting the puller in. So it is very tight in there. That's why I was talking about that Tiger tool remover. You definitely, I don't know if you can fit a 3-jaw puller in there very well. It'd be hard. Normally a 3-jaw puller would be fine, but I kind of went for it in that case. Once you get the generator out, it kind of depends on your setup. You may need to take this cover off if you have a radiator there. I know some of the smaller Power Techs that were on these coaches had like a radiator like right there. Mine actually has this remote radiator setup that's around on the side. So I didn't do that, and honestly I could fit in there pretty well. But the main tip I could give you there is that once you pull this out, there's some sheet metal that's actually on the side of kind of like the radiator box area. And I actually took that sheet metal off and got a hole in there. So that's actually, I just cut that with a box knife. It's kind of a little jacked up right now. But basically that allowed me access to the pitman arm. And you can see the pitman arm right up there. And let me try to get in a little bit closer so you can see the retainer nut on there. But right there you can actually see the retainer nut. And that's what you're going to be putting that 5/8 drive on. There's some little clips that need to come down. You might see this in a few other of the videos that are on this. So those clips need to come off. You just use you can use a screwdriver sometimes to get them off. And I would kind of recommend doing that. And then you put the Allen drive in there. I don't know if you can kind of see that very well. It's pretty kind of dark in there, but you can see where the Allen drive actually goes in up there, and that's where I used the Milwaukee Impact. I basically held it around where my generator is, and I fed that through the other side to actually get to actually loosen that. It was it was so tight. So the first, I mean, that was kind of the main thing I had to do there. But I would really recommend doing some PB Blaster on there and letting that sit for a while. And then honestly, right after that, because I was getting it rebuilt, I hit it with heat. And so pretty much right around the top area up here, I would heat that area with a MAP gas torch. You know, being careful, not, you know, maybe having someone there to watch out if it's, yeah, you're probably not going to catch anything on fire, but it's always a good idea to have a partner nearby for that kind of thing. But as soon as I hit that with the MAP gas torch for a minute, got it hot, and then I started hitting it, hit the remover, the impact gun, it was able to get the screw out. Then right after that, I put that Tiger Tool M100 puller over there, and it popped the pitman arm right off. That was the biggest pain, was just getting the pitman arm off. And from there, there's like 6 bolts. You can see this big one on here. So that there's 6 bolts that kind of go around it. I don't know if you can see those very well. Let me zoom in. So see those bolts right there? Those I use the 1/2-inch big breaker bar, and I just got on those puppies, and they popped out. You know, they did need some stuff with the breaker bar, but I did it all from underneath the coach. I did all of those bolts in the circular pattern. I think there's 6 of them that come out. And then I actually left these 2 larger bolts that actually hold the unit in. There's one here, and there's one up top that's kind of obscured. I don't know if you guys can see it. See that one right there? That's up top. And that one will need to be removed later. So from here, what I did was I went around to the other side. Now this is something I learned kind of after the fact. There's not really enough space in here to get this unit out with this sheet metal work here. So I don't know if you guys all have this. These are some pressure sensors for the air brakes. I believe that's like to actually engage your brake lights. Anyhow, this sheet metal work was way too tight to the face of that box. So what I did was I got in here with a Dremel tool. You may need to, you can maybe get an angle grinder in there. This giant fan unit for the generator, that was totally in my way. So I just used a Dremel tool, and it took a little while, but I took this back about 1.5 inches, this sheet metal here. And I learned that because the first time when I got it out, before I put it back in, I pried the living crap out of it with like a 2x4 to get this thing to come out. The unit needs to come this way to get the sector shaft to clear. It needs to come out, and this metal blocks it. So anyhow, I cut that back, and I left a little, you might be able to see it, it's kind of curled over at the top, but basically that allows me to get the unit out. So I would definitely do that, is trim this material back a little bit if you have this piece. If not, just ignore that part. The next thing I did was I took off the lines. That was relatively easy to do. You're just going to use an open end wrench to get on these lines. So right back in there. And then there's a line that goes up front. You see that blue line. Maybe it's different color on your coach, but that's the return line, I'm pretty sure. And that's going to go up front. That's just up front. You can crawl under and pretty easily get to that. The next thing to do is to loosen the bolt. Let me show you. Alright, you might be able to see this bolt right up top there on the steering input shaft. You're going to want to get that bolt out. I just used like a bunch of extensions and got the wrench out away from there, and I held it with a wrench on the other side. So it's kind of a tight access, but you can definitely get that out. Just make sure the steering wheel's straight when you're doing that, because it's much easier to access it through there if the wheel's straight. Yeah, so the next step from there to actually get this off of here is we're going to go inside the coach, and I'll show you that. So from the inside, you're going to have to take off these 4 bolts right here. There's 1, 2 on this side and 3, 4 on the other. These are a pain because they're like a locking type fastener. But you got to get those off, and what'll actually happen, you don't need to like detach the steering wheel or anything. But what I did is I had a partner lift up on the wheel, and that actually popped the input shaft off. So that way I could actually get the box be removed. From there, what I did was I just temporarily fastened it in like loosely with like 2 of the bolts. So I just retightened the bolts a little bit, and that's just to hold the wheel so it's not like causing stress on these lines, or the signal wires, and like that wire. All right. So that's kind of like the main step there to get this thing out, is you need to get that wheel loose and pull it up. Okay, and then kind of the next thing here is that we go back over, and there's those 2 large bolts. Now, those 2 large bolts actually are like holding the unit in place now. I basically just use gravity from there. What I did was I got everything kind of out of the way. There's a lot of space up under the front here to where this unit can fall. I mean, I was kind of like, hey, you know what? If it hurts something on the way down, nothing's super expensive in it. It's not going to cause a major problem. So all I did was I loosened those 2 bolts up, and I actually pulled the unit back a little bit, and then it naturally wanted to fall out of the front. So I just let it fall to the ground from there. So you can use straps from the steering column to lower it if you would like to. But honestly, it's a 90-pound unit and it's pure steel. It's not going to hurt anything you're going to drop it on. So that's kind of the getting it out. The next step is getting it back in. I would recommend, you kind of need a partner for this, but what I would do is have 2 tie-down straps around this unit from the ground. So you're going to have it on the ground, kind of prop it up like it's, like it's in position here. And then I use the tie-down straps, and actually like ratcheting tie-down straps. And I took those ratcheting tie-down straps and took put them on the steering column with the bolts on it, and then I ratcheted the thing up into place. Once it was close enough, you know, say within an inch or two of where it needs to be, I just manually lifted it and pushed it into the hole, basically where that sector shaft is going through the hole that you'll see. And then as soon as that happens, you pretty much need to get one of the large bolts that you took out last, and then put one of those bolts in place. Just get one in there and get it threaded on. That way it kind of stays in position. Once you have that, you can start to reattach all the bolts on the other side, and you'll be okay from there. Notes as far as like putting the steering shaft back on, you definitely want to have someone inside, and they can lift that wheel, and that's going to lift that universal joint for the steering input shaft up and down. So you'll just basically have to, you know, get it positioned. It has a flat machined into it, so you can't really screw that up. So you'll just have to have someone on the inside kind of holding the wheel up with their hands, and then, you know, kind of slowly lowering it down onto that input shaft. That's how I did it, and it worked out pretty well. But yeah, if you don't have someone else, you could use like some sort of maybe like tie down system, like a ratcheting tie down system from the roof, but it's just much easier to have a partner for this kind of job. Then you just reattach your lines while you're up here. And then, you know, going back under the coach, you'll see those attachment bolts right here. They're in a circular pattern. Those bolts that are around the steering the sector shaft, I tighten those to like 100 foot-pounds. I just used a torque wrench to get that close enough. I'm not sure of an exact, you know, measurement, but I just kind of thought that was pretty good for the fastener size. Over here, those are the two larger bolts there that hold this thing on. So those I did 150 foot-pounds. I mean, you got a lot of fasteners holding this thing on there now, so I think that's pretty good. The next thing is you have to get now here's a tip when you're taking this thing out. If you can, get like a paint marker and mark the pitman arm in where the sector shaft is. That makes sure that you have it in time. If you don't do that, like, yes, there are factory markings on there, but mine were kind of jacked up. It didn't really make sense. So honestly, I took a wild guess and just kind of put it on there. I guessed correctly, and the wheel's now perfectly straight, but if you're off, your wheel will be like off kilter when you're going down the road, and it'll be kind of janky. It's not going to hurt anything, but, you know, it's not really correct. Once you get it in place, the pitman arm actually slips on pretty easy because it's a tapered fitting. I would definitely, this retaining nut right here, if you can see that retaining nut, Shepherd recommends putting some anti-seize on there. So definitely go for some anti-seize on the face of that nut and on the threads. That way when you're putting it in there, it doesn't seize up on you. Because basically what I did was I used my impact driver until it wouldn't impact anymore. I tightened the crap out of this. It says 350 foot-pounds, but the thing is, you can't really get like, say, a big dial indicator torque wrench in there to like do this. So I just used my impact gun, and I went, you know, until it was very, very tight, and then I made sure to put down, you definitely want to put down, there's some little tabs on there, and you'll maybe see this on some other videos too, but make sure those tabs are in place. So tighten it all the way, and then move it a little bit further until you can get one of those tabs in place, and I'd say that's pretty safe. Put those tabs down with a small punch and a small hammer. If you can't fit it in there, you might be able to just push it really hard with a screwdriver, but you should be able to get a small hammer in there to get those puppies put down. But that's kind of most of the job. It's definitely rough, and I couldn't necessarily say I'd recommend it right away, but, you know, if you have to do it, it can definitely be done by, you know, a normal guy. I have a lot of automotive experience, but I never worked on anything exactly like this, and it was easy enough to figure out. Alright guys, I hope you all liked the video on going through the steering box replacement on my Foretravel U320. If you guys have any questions on it, or like need any advice on it, it's a hell of a job, but it can be done. If you I would say if you're not like very like physically able, I'd take it to a shop. It's a 90-pound steering box. It's crawling under a coach. It's not really the funnest thing in the world to do. But in my case, I kind of had to because I had such a bad leak that I really couldn't get it to a nearby shop to do that. So in any case, I wish you luck on it. Have fun. Thanks.